by the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance, by Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, Stiftung, the New York office, and my own organization, Bread for the World. I come to the introduction of the panel later. I just would like to get you in. Where are we? So first slide, please, Rose. And where are we now? So we're in the year 2024, 9 years after the Paris Agreement was sealed. And we are so happy to see the world transitioning away from fossil fuels in the Future Pact. It's very sad that comes so late after over 30 years of, no, nearly now 30 years of negotiating climate justice and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So we are very frustrated about that, but about this injustice, and but we are also full of hope, because otherwise we couldn't do this job. And she's laughing. She's laughing. Still we have hope that we can have a better future and more climate just future. But at the moment, it doesn't look that good. So we have the hottest temperatures on record. Especially Europe was pretty much, also for Europe, the European summer was the hottest on record. I'm from Berlin, so therefore I thought it would also be worth mentioning that it's not only hitting the global south, and the global north can say, well, why would I care? No, they should care. Next slide, please. So I prepared the presentation a week ago. Didn't know little that there would be new floodings hitting Africa, Central Africa, Western Africa, so badly as they did the floods in Eastern Africa in May 2024, where millions of people were impacted. And the same is happening now again. It's the floods and the weather extreme events hitting Africa are 3 times worse than the year before, causing far more costs. And the very unjust thing is that Africa is literally discriminated by giving access to adaptation finance. Like if you see the map, where is the little funding for adaptation finance going to? Not to Africa, not to least developed countries. So they're going to some countries. They also need it, like Brazil and India. Clearly, they need climate finance and adaptation finance, but they go there for geostrategic reasons. So, but the countries with the highest climate risks in the poorest areas, they have least access to this help. And then we had the forest fires in Brazil. I just didn't want to come with the same presentation that I gave last year. So I looked into the weather extreme events just of the last months, which were just astonishing and terrible. Please, the next slide. Sorry. So like the forest fires in Brazil, where like millions of people had to breathe the worst air on this planet. Thank you. Next one. Yeah, and then the Western world, we experience now in Europe a big shift towards right radical parties. They are literally empowered now. Those parties who are denying climate change, they are on the rise because people just are not interested in taking the costs or the transformation into a low carbon economy. So they're voting for parties who are telling them, no, climate change doesn't exist. You don't have to change at all. So, and now these countries are surprised by the worst floods. I'm not saying that because I'm happy about it, that climate change is teaching them a lesson. It's really not pleasant to see how many millions of people are impacted now in Western and Central Europe. And the European Union, because it's about climate finance here, European Union just agreed that they will give 11 billion euro from a rescue fund for these countries. No? For our own European countries, we have the funds, but just not for those in the global south who added zero to the problem. The next, please. So this is just like, I don't know if you put this online, therefore I thought I'm not reading all of that, but we see the climate impacts all over the planet. It's a crisis that we cannot deny anymore. It's brutal in the impacts. There are millions of people displaced by climate change, and even more will be displaced in future because of climate change. We see that the costs are rising into the trillions, and that is also what we will discuss here today. I mean, science is saying very clearly that climate change is man-made, and it is and the impacts, just if we go below 1.5 over 2 degrees, and at the moment we are heading towards 2.7 degrees global warming by the climate policies that are out there of the states, or the willingness, what they want to contribute to combat climate change, is very poor. Even the transitioning away from fossil fuels from the Future Pact won't help that, because it comes too late by 2050. I mean, sorry, until then that is done. So we have to take action. I welcome now our distinguished panel. And when I was not joking when I said we have here the global expertise of climate activists following the UNFCCC process already for decades. Here I welcome Hamira Kobusinge. She is in Uganda. She is following us virtually, and she will hopefully provide her input virtually if Rose gets this done. She is, thank you, Rose, for the efforts. She's from Climate Justice Africa, the founder of Climate Justice Africa from Uganda. So, and then I welcome here Adrian Martinez from La Ruta del Clima. He's the director of La Ruta del Clima, long-term expertise in the UNFCCC process, and I know him very well from his fantastic work on reparations, debt relief, and loss and damage work especially. Thank you for being with us. And here on my side is my dearest friend, Raju Pandit-Chetri. He's from the director of the Prakriti Resource Center in Nepal. He supports the least developed countries negotiator group on climate finance for, as long as I know you, it must have been something like 16 years or something like this. Yeah. And my dearest friend, Miss Tetet Lauron, she is with the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation in the New York office based, and Tetet is like the most notorious person in this process, very well known. Yeah, see, here's your fan community on gender rights, on climate justice issues, about climate finance, loss and damage finance. I don't know where to start and where to end. So Ted, thanks for being with us here to bring woman power to this panel. And it was Dr. Mitika Mwenda from Pakshao who should be here on the panel, but he informed me that his colleague will be with us. So I welcome Augustine Jamanshi from PACCHA, from the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. Hello, welcome with us. I hope you can introduce yourself as well a little bit more, because we just met 1 minute ago. So I will start now, and we have 2 rounds, a quick warm-up, because you all come from countries heavily impacted by climate change on a panel. And before we go now in the nitty-gritty of climate justice and what we ask from the in multilateral processes, I'd like to give the floor to you and start with you, Augustine, and give us a view from your country, where you're from, and how the country you're coming from is impacted by climate change. And then we do a little round, and we end up with Hamira, who will be then from Uganda. She's here. You know what? Because I'm so glad that she's here, and I'm afraid that the line might break up. Can we give priority to Hamira, that she can start? Hamira, 3 minutes. How is Uganda impacted by climate change? Maybe you can start, and then Augustine, he will understand that the ladies first from Africa. Hello, Hamira, go.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here. Can you hear me? Super. I'm very glad to be here, and I'm privileged to be here today to discuss a very important and very urgent topic, which is climate finance. My name is Hamira Kopsinje, like I was introduced. I'm very happy that can you hear me? Super.
Yeah.
I am. Okay, thank you. I'm very happy that in Sabina's presentation, she had even the recent climate crisis impacts that have happened in our countries. For instance, I came back to the country and devastated that we had floods happening in the central city of our country, and so many people's businesses went on a standstill, but also not forgetting that we actually still are facing the droughts in the Karamoja region of our country and the hunger crisis. It's very disheartening that also we have landslides in the western region of our country. And all these impacts these are impacts that are faced by a least developed country, a country that has to take out debt every time we go through an incident like this, and for disaster preparedness. Our country is becoming indebted due to the process of
So unfortunately, that is not working, no? No? Okay. Okay, look, Kamira, that doesn't work. So I continue now. Stay tuned. Maybe we get you in later. So please, Augustine, please introduce yourself briefly and say where are you from and how is your country impacted?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My name is Augustine Jamshi. I am a co-founder and chair of technical and political affairs of the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. I'm based in Cameroon. If you limited me to my country, I would say you are right on spot, because at the moment as we speak, the northern part of Cameroon is under water. More than 150,000 families have been affected by the floods that started on 10th of August, 2024, and it is moving on. We see communities that live from droughts into floods. So we're in a continent and a country that is burning and flooding at the same time. We see whole families lose their crops, lose their animals, and they have nothing else to count on earth. This is how bad climate change is affecting Cameroon. This is how bad climate change is affecting African countries. From the Horn of Africa to the most western part of Africa, we have floods, we have droughts. We heard of Malawi, Mozambique, Nigeria, the Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo. These are silent crises that nobody talks about, but we are drowning and burning at the same time. Climate change is real where I come from.
Thank you so much for being with us and for sharing. Please, Racho, 3 minutes on Nepal.
Thank you very much, Sabina, and namaste to everyone. Well, if we talk about the impacts of climate change in Nepal, Nepal being a very mountainous country, but also given the geography that we have with high mountains, hills, and plains, we have all sort of problems, in fact, given the situation we are in currently. Well, just to give you a context, just this monsoon, whereas monsoon in Nepal or in entire South Asia is supposed to be a very good thing for us, because that's the lifeline for lives and livelihood for millions of people living in the region. Or let's say, we have about over 1 billion people now. Well, in that particular context, this monsoon alone, we lost about 225 people. 50 people are still missing, and over 300 people were injured due to the impacts of all these floods and landslides. Now, the interesting part is this number never make it to the headlines of the international news. It's only limited to our own regional or the national context. What does this mean for? In the past, we have had huge mountain landslides. And this year, we had a very interesting impact as well. In the Everest region, we lost 2 glacier lakes. Of course, the glacier lakes in the mountains are now growing, and the ice cap is turning into water, and it's increasing the size of the lakes. It means that it outburst this year with 2 lakes. One of the villages in that mountain region was completely swept away. But again, I say that this was never made in the headlines. Now, this has impact in the downstreams for millions of people that rely on agriculture, that rely with the communities that have been that are being forced to move, and also we are losing infrastructure. Been lost. Put that into a very economic terms, we have been losing tens of millions of dollars every year, and this is only growing. So if you can imagine with that impact, what is going to happen with our meeting the SDG goals with addressing poverty, education, building infrastructure, and also securing food security and so on and so forth. Now the problem is this is leading to a lot of mass movements, migration, outward within the country and outside as well. So if you see in terms of very,
billion US dollar a year. And this is what the new session will be now about. We will bring in now our global south, our feminist, our youth perspective, and speaking about the different perspectives that we have on this new global target. And it's called New Collective Quantified Goal, in short, NCQG. And I guess, especially when Racho is speaking in negotiator language, you will hear NCQG now quite often, and it means nothing else than the new provision for climate finance for the years to come after 2025. So, Augustine, what, from a global south perspective, yeah, who is accountable for paying up the mess that was created? How to make polluters pay up for the climate finance? Who is accountable, and what is your view on climate justice from a global south perspective?
Thank you very much. There is nothing we're inventing here. Article 9 of the Paris Agreement is very clear. Climate finance is that finance that leaves developed country parties for climate action in developing country parties. This means where the finance has to come from is very clear, and where the action has to take place with the money. It goes further to say this finance should be predictable, additional, and meet the needs, priorities, and plans of developing countries. It's very clear. It should be accessible. What have we seen over the years? Climate finance has been very little and not even targeting the needs and priorities of developing countries. What are our needs and priorities? Our needs and priorities is coping, adapting to this problem of climate change that we never caused. If you look at CPI figures, it says climate policy initiative. The figures are well verified. It says climate finance between 2019 and 2020 was $632 billion. Out of these $632 billion, only $46 billion were meant for adaptation, which means the needs and priorities of developing countries are not being met. Even in the $100 billion target that you talked about, only about $21 billion was for adaptation. It means the needs and priorities of developing countries, especially Africa, are not being met. That is why when we celebrated the doubling of adaptation finance in Glasgow, when it was announced, we came together as Africans and asked, doubling from what number to what number? Are we talking of $21 billion? Are we talking of the $46 billion of the CPI figures? Adaptation needs for Africa alone are $52 billion by 2030. Okay, so this means if nothing is done, we'll continue to pay for adaptation with our lives. In fact, there is a Tier Fund report that came out in 2022. The title is Dying to Adapt. They made a study of 11 sub-Saharan African countries representing 350 million people. Those countries were spending and will continue to spend 5 times their budget for adaptation than they're spending for healthcare. What does this mean? It means Africans are paying for adaptation with their lives. This is unfair. This is unjust. What we have seen, most of the money has been coming in form of loans. That is injustice. There's a study that came out last year that shows that adaptation finance for LDCs of Africa, least developed countries of Africa, form of loan and not grants. 57% of this money was in form of loans and not grants. Now, this will bring what we call reverse flow. Reverse flow will be climate finance. Instead of leaving developed countries into developing countries, it will be leaving developing countries into developed countries. Because if I borrow $100,000 and I have to pay 20% of interest, when I'm paying, I will be paying $120,000. At the end of the day, the money has left developing countries to developed countries because they have given the money on a loan. So it's defeating the purpose of Article 9 of Paris Agreement. Comrades, ladies and gentlemen, if we are not outraged with this injustice, then we'll be failing. In the morning, we said, a people that are united can never be defeated. How united are we? Today it's happening for Africa. It's happening in Sri Lanka and other places. If we are not outraged and change the system, everybody will sink. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Augustine, to bring in the African perspective. And we stay in Africa and we bring in now the youth perspective of hopefully Hamira. Hamira, you were cut off. Please, briefly, maybe you can take us in your country, Uganda, the impacts of climate change on your country. Sorry, I always turn my head, but you're here in front. And what is your youth perspective? What is important? What has to happen in Baku that you have a safe future and for the generations to come? So please, Hamira, floor is yours. 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to actually be able to present on this case. I'll start with what should happen in Baku, then I move, probably I'll mix everything. As we go to Baku, we should remember that we go with communities. In the beginning, Sabina had a presentation for us where she actually had the most recent impacts of the climate crisis, what our people are going through. I told you how my people right now, there's flooding in most parts of the country, there's landslides in most parts of the country. The women are being impacted, and we cannot forget that the climate crisis is affecting our livelihood and our living. It's taking lives. And like every speaker has told you what they're experiencing in their country. When we go to Baku, I know Global North negotiators and the major polluters historically that have contributed to the climate crisis, as we have seen in statistics and what we see in our countries, are trying to have all different kinds of excuses why they should not be able, they should not be giving us money, why they're bringing up every kind of excuse to avoid paying or to avoid providing the finances that are needed to deal with adaptation, to deal with mitigation, and to deal with loss and damage. Let's go to Baku, thinking of the lives that are being destroyed in our communities. Let's go to Baku, thinking of the people whose communities are being washed away. That being said, in my country, even women and young girls are having issues receiving health. The climate crisis is affecting the health of the people in my country. And also, we are noticing that there's food insecurity, which is actually happening to almost 40% of the country's population. We also noticed the climate crisis has also impacted the agriculture systems. It has impacted the financial systems of our country. And this is not a very healthy place for our country to be. Let's not forget that as we talk about the climate crisis, we also talk about development. The countries like the former speaker has talked about, while we're busy trying to survive and busy trying to deal with the climate crisis or with the impacts that are happening in our communities, with the floods, with the droughts, with all these issues that we are dealing with in our communities, the food insecurities, most of our budget, our country's budget, is washed away within trying to deal with the losses and that we have impacted and the damages. And we're not forgetting that the world is looking at Africa, which has caused the least amount of pollution and which has contributed the least to the climate crisis, to actually be the place where we move and deal with people. We start planting trees, we start mitigating, we avoid pollution. Yet we are forgetting that we cause the least of the pollution, and we are hoping that in Baku we also put this in context and make sure that the finance is provided. I have so many times had the question of where will the money come from? There's no money, governments don't have money, but the truth is there is money. Just in 2022, $742 billion were invested in the fossil fuels industry. Imagine if that money was translated into climate finance, into our communities, into the climate finance bank, and we have that money and give it to the communities that actually need it the most. This is something that will actually help our communities the most, and also it will help us mitigate and adapt to the climate crisis. I don't know if my minutes are still there, but I still have a lot to go. It's just that I feel like no one is timing me, so I don't want to be cut off.
Thank you. Yeah,
You're
please.
welcome.
What? Yeah, but the question round comes a bit later. Can we go on and then we have a question answer round? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, stay here and we will discuss this once we have finished our panel. Thank you for being with us. And yeah, very sad that Tamira is not with us because she applied for an appointment to get her visa with the US Embassy in Uganda, and I gave her an appointment next year in April. So that's why she's not with us here. So thanks, Tamira, that you don't let yourself down and that you fight here even against the internet connections. Great, thanks. So next woman power voice. Tet, please, from a feminist perspective, what has to happen in Baku?
You've probably heard of the expression. Or the
Working. Can we have a new? Wow, does now.
So it's generally used to establish the pitch for a common goal that most of our decisions and actions affect everyone. It's true, but there's also an important nuance that is often overlooked, and that nuance changes the situation a whole lot. This whole phrase was probably invented by the Greeks and then modified with the Chinese. Now, so each culture has a different but similar interpretation. This affirms the idea that there's something that unites us, especially in adversity, transcending culture, society, and time. This is both comforting and helpful, right? But then, while this phrase may sound optimistic, it doesn't capture the essence of the reality that we live in, which is why it's often used as a wild card to not make that extra effort to do the right thing. It's the same story in the negotiations, and that is completely unjust. Thinking that we're all on the same boat becomes an excuse to continue seeing reality through a narrow individual, race, sometimes national or country perspective. Many states and governments and companies ask the most disadvantaged people to tighten their belts in times of crisis, right? Austerity, to save society, to save businesses, so that these are often passed on to the shoulders of those who have done very little to contribute to this crisis, while those that belong to the higher strata are hardly affected. I think I heard that in the UN also, no? So the idea that we should all contribute to the same global problem, towards climate action, to manage the unavoidable, which is adaptation basically, to avoid the unmanageable, which is mitigation, it has become a twisted mechanism to preserve a deeply unequal system in which those who have done the most and have profited the most from the damages are precisely those who make the least commitment and effort. Here's the sad truth. We're not on the same boat, but we are in the same sea. There are those who travel in comfortable cruise ships and yachts, while others go in small boats. And there are also those who cling to a life preserver and those who try to swim with all their might. And this is the situation now that we have when it comes to climate finance, especially for adaptation and especially for loss and damage. At COP27 in Egypt, we were prepared to come home disappointed. You know, the story of COPs. But then, surprise, surprise, they approved, they adopted the decision to establish a loss and damage fund. After 31 years of inaction, of delay, of obfuscation by developed countries, since the first proposal made by Vanuatu in 1991 to have a financing mechanism to cover losses and damages. So what has happened since then? Um, we have pledges, promises, no, made in Egypt, made in Dubai, for loss and damage. But what are those promises? What are those pledges? In the face of billions and trillions needed for loss and damage, we have 661 million pledged by the rich countries. The US pledged $17.5 million, Germany 110, the UK 50 million, Canada 0.6, Japan 10 million, all on a voluntary basis because they don't want to be held liable and accountable for loss and damage. So they're saying we're doing this out of the goodness of our heart. Yeah? So the question now becomes who should pay? According to the convention, it should be developed countries paying up for historical responsibility. But then now, the rich countries are saying, no, we don't mention the convention anymore. It's about Paris Agreement, where everyone contributes to solve the problem. Who receives? Again, the convention said it should be all developing countries should receive loss and damage money. But then now, rich countries are saying, no, it should be Africa, it should be AOCs. They're dividing the unity of all developing countries in the negotiations because when we're not united, they can easily crush us and they can get away with it. Yeah? And how will the money be disbursed? So there's so many financing tools, financial mechanisms, but what's clear, it should be grant based, it should be public money, but what we're being offered are loans, insurance schemes, guarantees, equity, policy based finance, which is another euphemism for conditionalities because it's the World Bank who will be the host of this loss and damage fund. So again, are we on the same boat? I don't think so. We're on the same sea. But how do we change the situation? Yeah.
Powerful. Thank you so much. And Adrian, you are working to bring justice to the frontline communities. You're calling for reparations as a human rights for them. So what has to happen in Baku for serving the people who are impacted and living in the front line of climate change?
I think one of the first things that has to happen is that we have to claim our rights. And this is something very difficult for many people in the NGO world, and especially if you're from the US, because somehow exercising your rights is something that is unheard of or is something that you should be polite about. But loss and damage is just a source of the failure of the UNFCCC. Climate change is caused by profit. It's economic actions that have generated harm, profit for some and harm for others. Others or have not benefited at all from the big economic actions from global north countries. And those are the case on the communities that I work with in Colombia and in Central America. Peasant communities, extremely poor communities, fisher communities in coastal regions that are suffering the brunt of climate change. And when I say that it is about a right, it is because it is legally a right to hold accountable those for responsible for transboundary environmental right, for wrongful acts, for not being having supervised your companies of not doing harm to others through economic actions. And that in international law, in environmental law, and in human rights law It is a right to call redress. It is a right to call compensation and liability, despite what paragraph 51 and the US and the European Union tried to impose, breaking general principles of international law within the UNFCCC. So when we say we have a right to climate reparation, it is not because I want fundraising from the Loss and Damage Fund. It's because it is a legal obligation to provide funding to those that you have harmed through economic action. And that is the bottom line of loss and damage. The convention had 30 years to do something. It never stabilized the emissions. The convention had the duty to protect food system. It did not protect food system. The convention had to accomplish an 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 adaptation ecosystem on your own means. It did not accomplish that. So what do we have now? Broken ecosystem services, broken communities, people fearing their own territories because you don't know what is the next hurricane or cyclone coming, or when is the next drought. Will your crop yield half what it did last year? Will you be able to eat? Will you have water or not? Those are not things of nature. Those are economic actions, and those are the consequences that others are living because of the wealth that we're sitting on in this city. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adrian. And now we go to the technical level, but I hope you pick us up there, Raju, you don't make it too complicated for us. He's a negotiator supporting the least developed countries group in the negotiations on climate finance. So Raju has like real expertise, what is needed for the poorest and most vulnerable countries in the climate crisis. So what do you expect from a climate justice perspective? What has to happen now in Baku in order to bring justice to the new climate finance goal after the years 2025? Please, Raju.
Thank you very much, Sabina, and hello to all again. I have 5 points to make. What needs to happen in Baku? So, in that context, first of all, just to let you know that in the second week of September, there was the last technical expert dialogue meeting that happened on this new collective quantified goal. So I just had the opportunity to attend that. Just coming from there, I don't have so much good news, in fact, because we are very far from what can be delivered or needs to be delivered in Baku in COP29. So as I say that for the success of COP29, climate finance will be the key element. And this is something the COP29 incoming presidency, Azerbaijan, has also said that they have really focused on climate finance. Without succeeding on climate finance, the COP29 is likely to be a failure because the climate finance is the bloodline for the success, or let's say it's a lifeline for the Paris Agreement. Without finance, the Paris Agreement is out. We're not implementing that. So that's a very key element. And so in that particular sense, we don't have the levity to really fail at COP29. But again, now if you look at the elements there, we are far from what Ted and others mentioned about the discussion, does it really reflect the needs and priorities of the developing countries? We have not even gotten into that discussion yet. Does it reflect what the science is telling us to reach the 1.5-degree target by the end of the century? No, we are not there. We are almost in 3-degree world currently. So in that particular sense, that there's lots to be done. So if that is not delivered, there's, Agustin, as you said, there's no fairness, there's no justice, there's no equity really being delivered at COP29. So this is one thing. The second part, the climate finance discussion, or the what you call the NCQZ, if you look at the name itself, it's talked about the quantum, the amount, like the 100 billion goal. What is the new quantum that we are going to have there? But having being discussed this for last 3 years, we have not even entered the discussion about what that quantum is going to be. Because if you look at the needs and priorities of the developing countries done by the UNFCCC itself, it says we need about 5.6 to 5.8 trillion dollars by 2030. So at least if you put that in average, we'll need about $1 trillion by year. But has that the ambition really been not there? So even what Sabina talked about, the 100 billion goal from 2020 to 2025, that was decided in 2009. If you put that in perspective now, that's going to be 150 billion US dollars. So it is the new goal is supposed to be from the floor of 100 billion, but the floor is no longer 100 billion. It's 150 billion US dollars. So that's my second point. How high are we going to rise on that? But does this, again, the new goal only going to be for mitigation? No. What I have said is we need clearly three elements that it needs to cover. One, the mitigation. Of course, we need to have the Paris Agreement objective, which is Article 2 in entirety being fulfilled, which talks about 1.1 is about 1.5-degree world. That's the second is also about the building resilient, the adaptation work. We really need to see in the context of addressing poverty and food security. And of course, the third part, as stated very nicely mentioned about, the loss and damage pillar. Because if you are not doing this, the loss and damage fund, if it doesn't become a part of the new climate finance goal, then again, that is a very big issue, because that fund that has just been established, been operationalized, is going to have a very slow death. In fact, it's already like it's going to die as a baby itself, because that's where the lifeline again is going to come from. The one final element on that second point is we need to have this balance between adaptation and mitigation, because now more than 80% of the finance is going to mitigation, which means that the adaptation is no longer a priority. For many of like Africa and Asia and a lot of the global South, adaptation is the key, because that's where the real need is really what the real need is. In terms of really doing, looking at this from food security, poverty addressing, or look at all the climate events that need to be really addressed. Because what is happening now currently is that in the name of mitigation, those countries that are small, that are very low pollution, are not being prioritized. And that again is the part of the justice element. But somebody might say that, okay, now there's no money out there and this and that. But if you just see how much money was mobilized for COVID, $11 trillion. In 2023 alone, for fossil fuel subsidy, $900 billion was provided. So that's the scale that we have. If there was a war, there's no lack of money for that particularly. Why is there's no money for climate action? Why can't we discuss about the quantum that is really required for the? It's a very fundamental part that we need to really look into. Third point, just having quantum is not sufficient. This money, whatever is being agreed, has to flow to the developing countries, flow to the countries, subnational governments, and to the communities. Those communities who are suffering from the impacts of climate change need to be delivered, and they need to feel that they are being supported. Currently, what is happening, as Sabina said earlier, a lot of numbers are being thrown out here and this, we have met this and that. But has that been the real money? If that 100 billion were met, where is that money? Why aren't the governments and the countries who are really suffering the impacts of climate change not really getting that resources? So that qualitative aspect of the climate finance is also very key. We know that a lot of conditionalities put to access, a lot of modalities being put, because it only creates conditions that developing countries are not able to access these resources. So that modality of how the money, whether is being agreed, to the impacts where the countries are really being felt, is that the bridge is being built or not. That has to be looked into the perspective. My fourth point, again, now, as Augustine also mentioned, it's very interesting to note, instead of the money flowing from developed countries to developing countries according to the UNF Convention or the Paris Agreement, it's the other way around. Developing countries are paying more than what actually they are being receiving. Out of the 45 least developed countries, 20 countries are already indebted. There's so much now they can no longer take loan. They're having to spend more money in terms of paying loan rather than actually resources being received, or let's say more than their development budget. So this is a huge injustice in that particular context. So we'll have to really look into that. My fifth point very quickly is about the capacity issue. We'll have to see that.
You have to speak.
I was loud. Oh, I thought I was loud. So I didn't want to shout as well. So I just wanted to be. My fifth point, it was about the capacity that we need to look into. Because the capacity is currently what is happening in the developing countries is it's always the international institutions who have been working on behalf of the developing countries. They don't, it's the mic, it's not me. It's I mean, it's very close. Well, I mean, I was talking about the capacities. Is that okay? Yes, good. the fifth point, I was talking about the capacity issue because the current system does not allow the developing countries to build their human and national institutions, human capacity and national institutions, because for them, it's always being delivered by the international institutions. Why can't the countries themselves do work for themselves? Like, building the human resources, national institutions, there's always have to be delivered by international institutions, whether it's UN agencies or MDBs and others. So over time, if we want that resources to really access and being utilized for the communities by the community, by the national governments and subnational governments, it is the institution that needs to be really built. So that is the fifth point that I wanted to say. And my final point again is, as we go to COP in Baku, we cannot let this fail. This is going to be the lifeline of Paris Agreement success, or let's say the implementation of that, because it's always not been focused or not being based on the needs of the communities or through reflecting or the fulfilling the needs of the people on the ground. It's always been politics, and there is no political will in terms of delivering this finance when it comes to really providing the climate finance under the negotiation. So I'm sure that there has to be a lot of pressure. There has to be a lot of moment going on to say that we can't fail Baku. If we fail Baku, then again, are we negotiating another Paris Agreement when it has not fully gone into implementation? That is the very key essence that we have to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Raju. So now you have the experts here on the panel. You can ask questions now. You can also make interventions, but not longer than 1.5 or 2 minutes. I'm very strict on this. And we are happy to answer the questions here. Please say your name, maybe also the organization that you are representing, and raise your question or make your comment. He will help us. Like this.
Yes. So, oops, we got it?
Yeah, you can hear me as well, right?
Yes. So, give us a chance to give you the microphone before you start speaking, because we have 60 friends and colleagues in the Zoom, so it's better if we use it.
So I see a lady here, lady there, and then I saw 2 hands on that side, and in the back I see here 5 people with their hands. So please, yeah,
Thank you.
introduce yourself. Don't forget
Yes.
that.
My name is Carmen Capriles. I come from Bolivia. One of the issues that I want to bring to the table is that so far, only this year, 350,000 square kilometers have been burned in the Amazonian in more than 5 countries. So, and they're burning the forest for agro-industry because nobody pays for forests, and we're committing the error of putting everything on financial terms again, and that doesn't work. And it's not saying that carbon markets work, but we need to rethink climate change. Climate change is not going to be solved by money. It is important, but what do we do? How do we start realizing the importance of having the forest, the water cycles and so on, because we're breaking those cycles. And okay, money is going to help, capacity building is going to help, but how do we recover this forest that's being lost in only a year, for example? And that's the size of Germany. It's not a very small part of the Amazon that's burning. And this is going on for the last 5 years, and it's been left-wing governments. So how do we change this? And we start finding also countries of the South a little bit more accountable, because historical debt, but what's going on now is something that we can do much more effectively than just hoping for the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the lady in front of you?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Sasha with Women Engaged for a Common Future. Great to see many well-known faces. My question to the panel is about finance. So it's to the colleagues from Nepal, to Tetet. Here at the Summit of the Future, the African group was really pushing to get language on UN global tax coordination and the billionaires tax. A little bit of that got into the text, because what we need indeed is additional taxation to be able to pay the trillions which we need, right? So how do you see this? Is the tax too weak? Do we still have enough? How do we link this to the FFD conference in Spain next year in June, so financing for development. And do we need to, join some type of advocacy between COP29 and FFD? That's my first question. And my second question was, we really need grants. So much of this money is only about loans. We need access to small grants for cooperatives and communities, for women-led renewable energy projects and things like that. And that part is always overlooked. It's all about the trillions as loans, and it's not about the small amounts which really change what's happening on the ground. So these are my two questions. Thanks.
Thank you. We have noted them. And please, here in the back, maybe you stand up and come a bit closer to him, then you can grab the mic. Yes, introduce yourself.
Faith Mutegi, Polycom Girls from Kenya. I would love to hear something about carbon markets because they're being presented as a solution, especially in East Africa, and it's a false solution. They are literally, the money that's being brought to, especially to conservancies, is displacing people in Kenya and Tanzania. Right now, there's a whole conversation going on in Tanzania about how the Maasais are losing their homes because of the carbon markets. They are not a solution. So can someone please comment on that? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the buzzwords here from the lady on the billionaires tax, very important carbon markets. We have that. And I saw the man here in the front, and there is also this, I saw you as well, and then I come to this side. Yeah, please, short interventions. Here, 1 minute. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, panelists, for your insightful information. My name is Suri, International Development Worker from Los Angeles, California. I have a question in regards of what actions can we take as civil societies. We talk about policy, funding, and holding governments from affluent countries responsible for the damage that have caused. But I'd like to know what is your suggestions for us. How can the civil society change our way of living and consuming? We consume internet, batteries to build phones and computers that come illegally from countries like Congo, cobalt, I think is the resources they use. But I think, in my opinion, is like we can talk about policy and ideas and all that, but if we don't change the way of we live and behave, we're not getting anywhere. How can we mobilize 8 billion human beings to adapt to a better thinking, a more cleaner way of living, more sustainable and more and consume less resources? Because we all want nice things. We all want the best of the best. We're hooked on the internet and all that contributes to climate change and all that. So I want to know more solutions. What can we do to step it up as the civil society? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then the man here and on the back. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. My name is Rasmus Jacobsen. I work with CARE. Just a little commercial. We've been doing a lot of research into climate finance. So if you sort of are interested in finding out more about the numbers and breakdowns and which countries are paying what and how much is loans and how much is grants, all of that stuff is available on the Climate Justice Center website. So you say CJC and CARE and you'll find tons of that stuff. But the question would be in terms of additionality. So in sort of a situation, I guess, where development funding is going down and we see lots of Western countries, Germany, Netherlands, Sweden, UK, sort of dropping their sort of foreign aid budgets. And on top, we've been struggling with the issue of additionality sort of all along. So recommendations, advice on how do we sort of take it forward and also, it's sort of what should our sort of aims be in terms of text and for moving that ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And here was the question from Azerbaijan. The lady, I want to give you something on a way. We really ask as civil society that civil society in Azerbaijan and also those who are visiting Baku is safe. So we are concerned about our safety going to Azerbaijan, and that is something we urge the government of Azerbaijan to make sure that there is a civil society representation, that we are safe there while we are there, and also the people in the country, civil societies, that they are also able to participate in this process. That was something that is for us as civil societies in solidarity with civil society worldwide and also in Azerbaijan, an important question for us, an issue, not question. Thank you. Please, you offered help.
Okay, Associate Professor Vafa Abdullaeva, and also representative of Azerbaijan at UNESCO. Azerbaijan is multicultural and tolerant country, and I don't think that you will have any problem about security and safe. You with pleasure can come in any time to our country, and also I would like to say that we all are talking about the financial problem, but I don't think that financial problem is the main problem. The main problem is the mind. Do we want to solve this problem really or not? Because financial, we have money provided for war, for weapon, yes, for other things. We provide money for these things. But why we don't want to provide money for this climate change or other important issues? We must find out this problem. And I think that first we have to change our mind and think that we really want to solve this problem or not.
Thank you very much. And there was another question. Yeah, please. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but the people are here in the room, and I would also give them the possibility before we take then also questions from virtually.
My name is Joe, and I represent Independent Business Development Network.
Louder, please.
My name is Joe, and I represent Independent Business Development Network. My question is to the gentleman, first of all. What is the impact of corruption on climate change, especially in Africa? That is number one. And to the other lady, my question is, how do we mainstream population explosion on the impact of climate change? Because you mentioned something about population, and she said that, the moderator, that human activity is the cause of climate change.
No.
So I think you said something like that when you
Burning of
just
fossil
started.
fuels is the
Oh, it's
problem.
part of the problem.
Yeah.
So what do we also do about that? If human activity is the problem, what are we doing to change that? Like she mentioned here about mindset. What are we going to do about that? So these are my questions to the three of you.
So I take one more from here, and then we go virtually. Yeah, okay. And what time do we have?
Thank you very much. My name is Cedric from Ghana, and I work with the African Youth Commission. I want to speak and also to ask a question about how do we increase access to finance and make these assets very flexible. And I speak from the backdrop of how we are all concerned about the UN structure in terms of the UN grants, and how sometimes if you apply for finance, it can take you 2 years or 3 years just to process your document, and even not even get a response in time. But then you cascade that to the CSO level, and you realize that that same problem with the UN system is happening even with the CSO. That there are CSOs that have so much complicated structure, so much bureaucracy, even in providing, finance. And here, let me give credit to PACJA. That PACJA, for instance, makes it very flexible for youth groups in Africa to plug into their funding structure. But yet still, young people from Africa still face a lot of difficulty when we apply for funding. You have to fill forms about 30 to 40 pages. And sometimes, the process can take 6 months. But flooding just happened in my community. And people are suffering, people are dying. And there are young people who are ready to take action. How do we? And then you can see that. You see that on BBC, you see that on CNN. And so even if I do not tell you, how do you engineer and restructure your financing mechanism such that you zoom in to these young people, these groups in these communities, and say, look, we have this funding. The original intent is not for you, but given the exigency of what is happening, we are coming to say that if you can do this,
Yes.
let's provide finance. But just to end.
No, sorry, everyone. Just
Okay.
so there are 2 more people online, and I know you get lunch at 1, so I'm under pressure. They told me already I have to finish up. So please, Rose, can we get the 2 questions online? Two online.
Can we have a quick comment before we?
What? Unmuted. So are you able to speak online? What is the name? Sarah is Sam. Can you speak?
Yes.
Yes, please, we hear you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for giving me opportunity. My name is Raisam. I'm a president for Khmer National Liberation Front based in Denmark and represent of the force eviction and land grab victim in Cambodia, that is the press regime. And I have the question to the host, Chavichan, that I also, as a chairman of like climate and gender equity in the global civil society in Africa, and I wonder why your host did not welcome the Khmer National Liberation to join the COP29. It is one thing. I was come from the repressed regime in Cambodia that was banned me in Cambodia, and then I live in a free country, and I don't understand why I have no right to join the COP29. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And there was another question. Can you, what was the name then?
Godwin.
Godwin, please. The floor is yours. Godwin? Can you speak, Godwin?
Okay.
Then I give now the lady.
Yes, I can speak.
Yeah, okay, please, Godwin, go for it. Go for it.
Okay, then thank you. So my name is Lasisi Godwin. I am a public health professional, young advocate for the SDGs. I currently champion youth-led efforts in Nigeria towards mitigation against climate displacement. So my question is specifically to the panel session in respect to, especially what Hamira said in respect to climate finance and issues revolving around funding to rural communities where they have little or no access to digital advocacy and access to technology. So how then do we begin to draw efforts and concentration and then attention to have young persons in their own rural communities without having to have direct contact with donor agencies, have access to direct funding, and then be able to battle climate change and then have a good fight against the triple planetary crisis the world is facing currently. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we have one final comment, but 30 seconds.
Hello, everyone. I'm Shabnam Delfani. I'm a full professor in Middlesex University from UK, and also I am a politician for the last 10 years. My PhD was about the climate change modeling, and I've been very much intensively working with the climate change. The thing is, finance is one parameter. Lots of greenwashing nowadays is happening, and to my view and research all this year, women and girls must be educated very intensively, because if we really want to tackle the climate change in developing country, there is a big gap in education side. And as an academic and researcher and campaigner, I believe education would play the key part, because by the financing and the trouble is going around at the moment, we cannot just put every pressure to just say we can get the finance. But what I see, unfortunately, there is not a clear action plan in place how we are going to tackle the climate change. Having said that, I have to add, as an activist and expert in climate change, I personally so against the electric car, and I have a belief on that, because creating the electric car is 10 times more damaging to the environment rather than fossil fuels. So it has to be something, we have to come to a proper solution instead of to just keep repeating, we need to do that, we need to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sabine, do I have your permission? I'm Konstantinos from the Global Council of GCAP, and since we're talking about financing on the way to Baku, my question is, who from civil society can actually afford to go to Baku or for the last 5 COPs for that matter?
Good question. Good question. It's incredible. Baku increased the hotel prices 5 times more now. So it's a huge challenge, especially for civil society to be in. And I would like to also answer before my distinguished panelists will get a minute to wrap up and answer questions. I also would like to say, yes, I'm very much for the billionaire tax, definitely. And as it was raised, that I said it, yes, climate change is man-made, definitely, but by burning of fossil fuels, not of having babies. It's the industrialized countries with a very low rate of population who creating the problem. And if you're coming, like, for example, the case of Africa, a country that was highly populated, added zero to the problem. So that was, I just don't want to be misunderstood. Man-made activities is purely meant to burning fossil fuels. So, and now I ask, Hamira, are you still with us? Because you, Hamira, get the first minute for a final statement in picking there were many questions here, so maybe you would answer in 1 minute your final conclusions by answering one of the questions that were out there. Please, Hamira, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can someone confirm that I'm being heard?
Yes.
Super. I think I chose one question that I've been very passionate about addressing, which is the carbon markets. And carbon markets are a very greenwashing solution that the global north and the polluters are introducing to the global south to actually keep polluting. And the disadvantages around carbon markets are that even polluting firms, like polluting corporations, can actually tap into carbon markets if they can afford it. Carbon markets are a rich benefit and the poor keep suffering. We have had issues even in Uganda. I remember the person who asked the question gave examples from Tanzania and Kenya. But even in Uganda, we have had communities that have been displaced from their places and left homeless due to these carbon markets and carbon credits. We should not forget that it is already developed countries that actually can afford to invest in these ventures. So carbon markets are not a very good thing for our communities because they exacerbate the already existing climate crisis and the issues that are already affecting communities. For instance, displacement, investment in fossil fuels leads to displacement of people and communities. So do carbon markets. Investment in carbon markets leads to destruction of biodiversity. So do carbon markets. And all these disadvantages attached to the climate crisis and investment on fossil fuels actually are the same disadvantages attached to the carbon markets. And it's a very disadvantageous greenwashing solution that has been provided for us. There were so many questions, but I believe in the already existing panelists, and I trust that they're going to answer them very well. But my closing remarks are, as we go to Baku, we should still remember that we are going to represent millions and millions of people that are already facing the impact, that are being impacted by the consequences of the climate crisis. As we negotiate, let's negotiate at the back of our minds, thinking that these are not just numbers, but these are lives and these are livelihoods. These are communities and these are people behind them. Much as Africa as a continent is one of the most affected countries, it can also be one of the key solution givers to this climate crisis. Hence, if climate finance is provided in the right aspect, where we have loss and damage for reparations, and we have adaptation finance to help us adapt to the changing climate, but also we have.
Oh, sorry, Hamira, you're gone again. As the food is coming 10 minutes late, I give now my panelists the possibility for maximum 2 minutes answering the questions that came up here. Please pick your question.
All right. I think there needs to be more conversations happening between the development finance geeks and the climate justice geeks. Yeah. It's good that it's happening now, slowly but surely. But for the longest time, the climate folks have been saying $100 billion, $100 billion, which for the development finance people, it's peanuts, no? Because we know that a lot more is needed. So given the changing landscape on loss and damage finance particularly, it's good that it's now, we're not just talking about $100 billion now, but we're talking about $5 trillion that rich countries, the polluters, should pay up. No? So at least it's improved. But we are also saying that we shouldn't allow ourselves to be trapped in that narrative that it's ODA, it's aid money, because there should be a firewall between what is aid and what is climate finance. But now it's being double, triple counted to include not only aid money, but also humanitarian assistance. So we need to get our narratives clearly, no, and strongly. We talk about innovative sources of finance, but while it is good, no, carbon tax, billionaires tax, we should not allow ourselves to be distracted. We cannot find the money for the polluters. They should pay up, no? It has to be principally public money. It has to be supplemented by those innovative sources. So let's talk about where the big monies are. It's in debt. Now, how can we not afford development and climate action? Because our countries are so indebted. Number two, illicit financial flows. That's like what Agustin said earlier. So I think those synergies, those difficult conversations that would bridge the development finance community and the climate justice community should be happening more frequently and more urgently. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ted. Thank you. And please.
So from my perspective, there's a big difference between value and money. To me, money is a means to manage resources, but value is not the same. We've got plenty of resources, and we seem to have a lot of money on the market and in our banks. But we're not placing value where we're supposed to have agreed to put value, which is in life and nature. So we had let the finance people tricked us into the idea that we lack money and that we lack the means to access money when we don't. We do have plenty of those tools. There is plenty of food, there's plenty of room. What there isn't plenty is about human dignity in how we make decisions. And that is why when we talk about justice or legal principles within the UNFCCC on the finance or any other topic, it tends to be thrown to the corner. And why is that? Because it breaks the system. Because currently the discussions are unjust. And that is something that communities know. It's something that we all can acknowledge because this is not working. And it's something that should then take us about why is the Amazon burning? It's because we place no value on the Amazon. Why are communities starving? Because we place no value on humans. We place value only on profit. So when we talk about what can communities do, what can we do in organizing, we have to control what is valuable. And I think we all agree as an international community many years ago that human rights are what is valuable, and we should fix on that, and we should organize on that and take power on that. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you very much. I will pick on 2 points. I fully agree on the part of linking climate and development aspect. I think that's been well said. Well, for the climate finance, yes, very much agree. The public money has to be the source, the core source of how much is really coming from the public source from the developed countries to the developing countries. Because, and you link it to the grants precisely because countries that are suffering from floods or landslides or these extreme events, how are you going to pay back if you take more loans? Even if it is a grant, sometimes that becomes extremely expensive because there's so much of conditionalities attached to that. So in that particular sense, that it's sometimes even for countries, grants are becoming expensive already. So for that reason, grants must be prioritized. And what it says, like for instance, loss and damage for adaptation. And who is going? And so often, sometimes there's like this lot of emphasis on private sector coming, making climate actions more investable. These are all how you make money out of things. Climate impacts about making money, but rather really helping communities and people on the ground. And in that particular case, grants and coming from the public source is extremely important. That's one thing I wanted to address. And because I agree that we need to finance, tax the billionaires, but at the same time also the fossil fuel, as I mentioned earlier, that there is money out there. Now, even just if we have very small tax on bunker fuels like aviation and shipping and all, we would raise about around from 15 to 20 billion dollars per year with a very minimal financing. So we can also substitute with the innovative sources. But on the lifestyle, somebody was asking about the lifestyle and also the population issue. It's very interesting because my friend Sabina is here. If we have the lifestyle like individual Germans, we would need 3.5 Earths, like 3.5 planets. So just imagine that. Whose lifestyle are we really talking about? Do we talk about the lifestyle in the developing countries who are poor and struggling their lives and livelihood? Are we talking about the rich people and the countries that need to actually think about it? Look at even with a very small population in some of the countries, their lifestyle is so much that they consume more than hundreds of millions of people in the global south. So I think we'll have to look that into perspective. And the corruption issue, it's always very easy to bring this. And we get this discussion all the time in the climate finance discussion. Of course, corruption is an issue. We'll have to tackle that. But we'll have to see that, even rich countries have corruption. We have seen there a lot of the ministers resign because there's corruption issues. But what kind of corruption are we really talking about and at what level? Because if we build on that excuses of corruption and not providing climate finance, then again, that's a big, big injustice. So we'll have to make things into perspective. There are certain things we need to do at communities, people on the ground. There are certain things that our national government must do, but there are certain responsibilities and obligations that the international communities at the international level must do, especially with the developed countries who have that obligation under the regime or the old context to really pay for the damage that they have caused. So I think we'll have to make that context very clear.
Thank you very much. I just want to go straight to the question about corruption. My colleague has already talked about it. And I just want to emphasize that we, the people, the civil society, the people on the communities, we have to have a seat at the table at all levels in order to curb what is called corruption. Because if at the end of the day, there's any form of climate finance that comes to a country, while the woman on the farm doesn't feel that there's something has come in, then it doesn't serve any purpose. The issue of governance is very key, but that should not be used as an excuse by developed countries to stop providing climate finance for developing countries because it's a matter of obligation. It is not a favor. They should provide that money, but we should make sure that the money is rightly used. Secondly, talking about grants, it is both a legal issue, moral issue, and a justice issue. If somebody sets fire on your house, can they give you a loan to rebuild that house? It is unjust. People want to adapt to climate change that they have not caused. Instead, you, the person that has caused the problem, has the duty to provide them with money to fix the problem or to cope. If you provide them with a loan, then you have set fire on their house and you are giving them a loan to rebuild it. That is unfair. And then that is corruption. At some point, that is corruption. So corruption should not be seen as an African thing or developing country thing. When Okay, thank you. I am happy, personally delighted that we've come out with a pact for the future. But I'm cautiously optimistic about the implementation of this pact. Let us ask ourselves, what happened with the pact of the past? As the global community, let us come out from here with a slogan, keep your promise. We've seen these promises from 1972 in Stockholm. We've seen it in Rio in 1992. We've seen it again in Rio in 2012. Today, we're having another pact. What will be the change? Let us keep our promises. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us here, and have a great lunch break. We are still here in the room if you want to talk to us and engage with us. We are very grateful that you spent 1.5 hours so well behaved with us. Thank you.
Thank you for this great panel. So the food is coming. Just one moment, please. So the food is around since 1 hour, but they had problems to pass the security. So it will be there in a few minutes.
We are the sufferers of the climate change, actually. Can I have